Welcome to the Decoding Story-Based Marketing Podcast. We're here to help you distill your brand message down to its most clear and powerful form.
Telling a story with your marketing is a great way to differentiate yourself, but it can be tough to do. We're here to share lessons learned about how to use the StoryBrand framework to stand out from the crowd. I'm Kristen.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Bo. And in today's episode, we explore the unique challenge of story-based marketing in the financial service area. It's a conversation about how to balance the need for clarity and finesse, and we're glad that you are here with us today. Annie and Kristen, our conversation is going to be centered around financial services, but we really feel that companies from all industries and spaces can benefit from this because what we're talking about is clarity and finesse. And so let me just start with this. Kristen, let's talk about the balance between being clear and direct and having tact, having finesse. Why do you need both clarity and finesse in your messaging and in your marketing?
Well, first of all, I think clarity underscores everything that we do. It is the most important element to implement in your marketing to make sure that people are not confused about what you do. We could talk all day long about the why behind that, but it's really, really clear that in any decent marketing strategy, you're underscoring everything with, is this clear? Is this simple? Is this powerful? Now, what can get tricky is in a few industries where there are some things that you just can't come out and say. For instance, in wealth management, you can't just come out and say, we're going to guarantee that you get a great return on your investment. We're going to make you a bunch of money. You can't just come out and say that. And so you have to think about one, balancing, balancing finesse in terms of course, like regulations, the compliance and things, but also just a general sense of tact, because there are some things that can be kind of tacky when you just come out and say it. So that's our balancing act here, right? Like, how do we be really, really clear in our messaging, but also make sure we are communicating in a way that is palatable to the audience, in a way they're going to receive, and isn't going to, set off any alarms when it comes to compliance and regulations. So that's the zone that we're in today.
That's great. Annie, what happens when one of those two things is missing? When either clarity or tact is missing, what can happen in messaging for a brand?
So there's a principle that I sort of love, like in all avenues of life, that I think is also really important here, which is kind of meeting people where they are. So if you only have clarity, which is very important. So if you're only going to have one thing, have this. But if you only have clarity, but you turn people off with what you say and what you do, that's not going to be very helpful. So with clarity, we really mean, are you describing your products, services, brand clearly without buzzwords, without any kind of, fluffy language around it? You got to be clear. But if you do that and people kind of turn away, that's not helpful. Then if you're overly tactful, or if you are like so kind of nuanced in the way that you language because you want to, you don't want to step on toes, you want to tiptoe around something that might be a little sensitive, well, then you're going to make your audience work really hard to kind of try to figure out what you actually do. So you have to meet people where they are. And you do that by being really clear. Don't make them work too hard to figure out what your financial services business does or how you differentiate from other wealth advisors. But you also need to be tactful and meet people where they are around their comfort level and talking about this topic. So they're two sides of the same coin, and they're really, really important to include in your marketing.
That's great. Yeah. So really we're talking about, you don't want to come in with a sledgehammer, but also you don't want to just tiptoe around it and avoid talking about the subject as a whole, right? Which really makes me wonder, Kristen, maybe you can speak to this. Why is talking about money tricky? Why is it a topic that requires both clarity and finesse? Why money in particular?
I feel like money is like the last taboo topic to talk about right now. Like, people will share about their sex lives before they're going to talk about what's going on with their retirement plans or what's in their checking account. So there is something that is weirdly deeply private about it. Like, it's private, but also people sometimes put it on display. So it's funny. So it's kind of a taboo topic. So I would say that's one reason it's kind of tricky. And to put it very bluntly, it's because everybody wants it, but most people don't talk about wanting it, or they feel like it might be gauche or tacky to talk about wanting it. So how do we communicate in that way when there is this topic that if we just come out, I mean, if someone says to me, they're going to make me a lot of money, I am very interested in that. But I would say it's just a funny taboo part of life right now that is interestingly private. So I'm curious, Annie, if you have other thoughts on that.
Well, I think the topic of money and, thinking about this from brand messaging and marketing in the financial services industry, it's really scary. Like there have absolutely been points in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, I do not want to talk about that topic because there's so much uncertainty around it. And sadly, as human beings, when we feel nervous about something or there is something scary in front of us, oftentimes we are predisposed to just ignore that thing. We are not often motivated to lean into the challenging topic at hand and really figure out how to solve it. So if you are selling a service that by nature, people want but may not have, meaning wealth and growing wealth, and the future feels scary and uncertain and the stakes are really high, that is just in and of itself going to be a hard challenge to overcome when you need people to face that they need your services to overcome that uncertainty. So I think that is a big contributor to why we feel nervous, not just socially talking about finances, but when it comes to seeking out a service related to our personal finances, it just feels scary, and humans are really good at avoiding the scary stuff.
You know what that makes me think of, Annie? That's so spot on, because I actually think specifically around financial services, people are helping people manage their wealth or build their wealth. There is a shame element with money that exists for a lot of people. If they're not where they want to be financially, or they're not doing what they feel like they should be doing with their money, or they started later than they wish that they had, there is kind of that internal I haven't done what I've done. So I haven't done what I wish I'd done. So is someone going to judge me when they see what I've really got going on? Or if I don't understand this, a lot of people don't quite understand how do mutual funds work and what are the different options. And they can get really nervous and almost embarrassed that they don't know this, even though, none of us is born with this knowledge inherently. So I think that's another reason it can be really tricky for businesses that are in the financial services sector to market, because they're marketing to an audience that may have some either fear or shame around this topic. And they may not be super ready to admit that or share that with someone. But what that also does is provide a massive opportunity when people recognize that, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But that really opens the door for if this is what's going on, and we know this is what's going on, how can we build that bridge to overcome that together?
Yeah, that's so good. I was thinking about that shame element as well, that people don't want to talk about things that they're not proud of. And there's unfortunately, so many people who aren't proud of their financial realities. And so how do we help brands communicate clearly? We can help with this, but also have the finesse of saying, you don't need to be ashamed about where you are. Let's just talk about where we can be in the future, right? So, Annie, when you're thinking about companies in the financial sector, in the financial world, wealth management and the rest, it was mentioned earlier that this is an area where you can't guarantee results, right? If you're dealing with the stock market, what you can guarantee is uncertainty. It's about all that you can guarantee sometimes. How do you effectively communicate about your brand if you're in a sector where you can't offer guarantees about the end result that customers, can expect?
Yeah. Well, in my mind, this is where a good mix of qualitative and quantitative is really helpful. So when we think about brand messaging, we always want to make sure that companies are communicating the value, the benefits, the success that they deliver to their customers. So there are a bunch of different ways to do that. Success stats and metrics can be a powerful way to do that. That is probably not the way that financial services companies can express success. So that's why sometimes embedding and infusing brand messaging with the more qualitative values and benefits can be a good way to balance it out. So we would never advise, a wealth manager to say, we guarantee that we will triple your money by X date. That's just not possible. So what we would do is we would walk that company through an exercise to say, well, what are the benefits that you can deliver? What is the unique and differentiated value that you are offering? Is it that you are, highly, intentional about the way that you kind of invest your portfolio? Is it that you offer white glove service? So there's a lot of face time that you are delivering there. What's some of that value that you are uniquely bringing to the market? And then what can people expect to, get out of that? If you offer high touch, white glove services, people are going to experience a significant peace of mind. They're going to know that when they have a problem down the line, they have your personal phone number and can call you directly and don't have to chat with a bot, right? So we really focus on, okay, we can't make promises, so let's not put numbers behind this, but let's talk about what the value is that you offer, how you're different from your competition, and then what are the outcomes that those unique value can really help drive for your clients.
I think too, in this field, there's a real opportunity for, a wealth manager to empower their clients with their messaging. So it's, we can't control the stock market. We all know that right now. Like, you can't control external forces. You don't know when a pandemic is going to come along or a war is going to happen. We don't know that. But here's what we know: if you do nothing, this is where this goes. This is where this story goes if no action is taken. And that's an opportunity in your messaging to craft that narrative. You don't want to be doom and gloom, but to say, like, we do know this. If you do nothing, this is where this goes. But here's your opportunity to control what you can control, to take action and make the smartest moves with the best support that you can have possible. So there's no guarantees. And I think in this world, acknowledge that. But also, if you're really, we always really advocate for a brand to position their customer as the hero of the story. And so then this kind of deals with some of that on, you don't need to be the superhero there to come in and say, I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to make you $10 million. We're not saying that. We are going to empower you to make really smart decisions, to try to mitigate your risk as much as possible, and to take the best action that you possibly can to really strengthen yourself for when external forces come in and pose a risk. So I think if you really follow, we apply that StoryBrand framework of that principle of positioning your client as the hero of the story, that is a great way to deal with that, where you're not offering guarantees, but you're saying, like, you got to go on the adventure. You got to start this quest, because if you don't, here's what happens. But if you do, here's what could be here for the taking.
That's great. And that actually leads me to my next question that I was just thinking about, because we obviously believe in the StoryBrand framework, and we think that brands can have great success implementing this framework. So for our friends in this financial service industry, where in the StoryBrand framework should they just go hard? What should they focus on when it comes to implementing the StoryBrand framework to their messaging when they're in the financial service industry? Annie, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, but I'm going to be honest. We should just abdicate to Kristen, who's the StoryBrand guru. So I'm going to take a guess. Here's what we're doing. I'm going to take a guess, and then we're going to gut check this based on Kristen, who should be the all-knowing power here. So I would say in the financial services industry, there are definitely a handful of things that they should focus on. If I had to pick one, I would say leaning into establishing the brand as the guide who is there to help the hero win the day. So this was mentioned previously, but brands should never position themselves as the hero who swoop in and save the day. That is what we need to position our clients as. So the client has to be the hero of the story, because as human beings, we're all the hero in our own story. Like, we don't want another hero to come in that's going to create competition. So position the client as the hero, and then you get to position your brand as the trusted guide who is there to help the hero win. So that would be my bet. And then let's see if I pass the test here with an A+, which is what I want.
Always an A+, Annie. Always. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, before we can pick which area we're going to focus on, I'm going to do the 7-second, what are we choosing from? So what are the different areas of StoryBrand framework we could focus on? It's what does the customer want? What's their problem? How are you positioning yourself as guide with empathy and authority? What's the plan that you're giving them that helps you stand out from the competition? What's the call to action? And then what are the stakes? There's a failure they should avoid and the success they can look forward to. So that's our bread and butter, right? And so that's what we're choosing between of where do you lean in really hard? So 100% guide. Absolutely. That's a massive opportunity to empathize with what they're going through and position yourself as the one who has the competence to help them. Yes. And plan. I would lean so hard into plan as a financial advisor. And there's a few reasons for this. One, people long to know that there is a plan for them. We need a path to follow. We need that, especially when there is a foggy, scary journey where there's some big stakes. So I would say plan, one, because people like that. And two, this is a crowded market. Not only are you competing with other financial advisors, you are competing with apps. You are competing with like DIY. You're competing with people out there that say, just focus on real estate investment. Don't worry about your Roth IRA. Always worry about your Roth IRA, by the way, always. So I would say, there's just so much competition out there. So you have to really clearly communicate what is your value plan or your value proposition to the client. What makes you different? How are you uniquely qualified to help? So again, Annie mentioned earlier, is it white glove service or is it education? Are you really education based where you're going to help people not just understand what money moves you're going to help them and guide them to make, but the why behind it? So whatever it is your unique superpowers are, you got to communicate that because you are battling against a sea of other wealth advisors and a sea of technology. And this is your opportunity to really stand out. So I would say guide, yes, and plan. Those are some really powerful areas to dig into.
That's great. Well, hey, as we prepare to wrap up, I would love for each of you to just share maybe just what's the one piece of decoded magic, the one thing that you've thought about or heard in this conversation that to our friends, specifically in the financial service industry, but maybe anybody listening who wants to grow both in their clarity and their tact and their finesse, what's the one thing that you would love for somebody to take away from this conversation?
I have a thought. Yep. So, kind of just how we started, just because you can't promise financial benchmarks or financial outcomes doesn't mean you shouldn't paint the picture of what life will look like if someone works with you. So don't let, the fact that you can't make promises scare you away from saying, hey, if you don't work with a wealth advisor or financial advisor, to shoot for your goals, these are the negative consequences that you could be faced with down the line. And if you do work with us, here is the type of success you can look forward to. So just because you can't make financial promises doesn't mean you shouldn't communicate both of those things.
And I would say for my parting thought is adopt a both and strategy for clarity and finesse. You have to have both of them in this field. So because, you don't want people to feel like they got beat over the head with your message, but you also don't want it to be like they just walked away from a conversation and feel like that felt great. I have no idea what just happened. So you need to make sure that you balance both clarity and finesse, but start with clarity. It's a lot easier to take a nice, clear message and then soften it as needed or finesse it as needed to make sure you're being very tactful than it is to go the other way around. So make sure you got that good, clear message and then adjust it a bit, and then you're going to be in really good shape.
That's so good. I love that thought. I was thinking the same thing about start with clarity and then finesse it and make it tactful. Don't start with finesse and try to get clear later on down the line, right? It's hard to reverse that. Well, so grateful for your thoughts on this. At Decoded Strategies, we are committed to helping you grow both in clarity and tact and finesse. And we help businesses execute marketing strategies to unlock growth and to win in the market. And if you want to learn more about Decoded Strategies, check us out at decodedstrategies.com. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn. We're grateful you are here with us today, and we will talk to you soon.